Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenos días. Bienvenidas y bienvenidos a este Seminario Institucional Explicar y Narrar, Nuevas poéticas de la investigación. Esta es nuestra tercera sesión ya del año. Y bueno, el día de hoy tenemos como invitado a Philippe Vanini. Él es investigador en la Royal Roads University en Canadá. Y bueno, por obvias razones, nuestro invitado no habla español, por lo que esta sesión va a ser en inglés. Philip, welcome. We are very pleased to have you here in this third session of the seminar, Explain and Narrate New Poetics of Research. I'm going to make a brief presentation of you. We already diffuse, we already share the link of your film, of your documentary. So some of us have already watched it, and well, we are going to be very glad to talk about this. So Philippe Vanini is an ethnographer, filmmaker, and author who has conducted research on busy ferries, off-grid living, small island cultures and communities, natural heritage, everyday life, the cultural aspects of the human senses, as well as food and culture. He's also author of books like Doing Ethnography and the Routledge International Handbook of Ethnography, Film and Video. And on his most recent research project, Philippe filmed the documentary In the Name of Wild. This documentary tells the story of a 5-year journey across 10 countries in search of the meanings of wild. The documentary film and interactive documentary explore wilderness in UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Thailand, Italy, Iceland, Canada, Belize, Ecuador, and Argentina. In the documentary, the authors, that is a family of 3, question about the meaning of wild, wilderness, and wildness in the local languages. In Spanish, we think about silvestre, salvaje, or natural. We as Western societies usually think about wild as opposite to society, to culture, and to human-made. But in many other cultures and in other languages, there is not a word to describe the meaning of wild. That is because it is a cultural construction. Wild is not a universal idea. Wildness and as uncivilized is also a colonial idea. In the documentary, a woman described the word as woofy because for her society and her culture, humans are not excluded from the idea of wilderness. Wild is not untouched. There are humans' footprints everywhere. That's why for some people, wild means home. It's not wilderness. It is just home. The outcome of the documentary is to rethink about wild as interconnected, social, and biocultural linked. Wild is something that is in relation with us, with human. So that is the idea of this documentary, and that is the idea of our conversation with you, Philippe. And we are very pleased, we're very glad to have you in this seminar, because one of the goals of this seminar is to talk about different ways of telling and narrating our outcomes as researchers. So thinking of that, to start our conversation, I would like you to tell us something about what is behind the project In the Name of Wild. Why did you choose film as a research method to capture the meanings of wild in different countries? What do you think would have happened if you had chosen another method to research this goal? So thank you, Philip, and well, you are welcome to start your conversation.
Thank you, Laura. And I think I'm getting a lot of voices. Perhaps.
Yeah, I think
See, I
there.
think
Yeah,
it's problem
yeah.
solved. Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for inviting me and for welcoming me. And again, my apologies for arriving late. It was a miscommunication based on a time difference and all those things. And of course, thank you for accommodating me in conducting this session in English, even though I understand that everyone else is a Spanish speaker. For the sake of full transparency, I understand Spanish, and it seems as though the farther south I go down Latin America, the better my understanding is.
Mhm.
Um, so if you at any point in time want to try my Spanish and ask me a question in Spanish, we can even. I just can't speak it, but I understand it quite well. Um, so no, let me address your question with a bit of a story, background, if you like. In 2011, I was appointed a Canada Research Chair in Public Ethnography. In Canada, we have a program, a federal program called the Canada Research Chair Program. It was designed, I think, in the 90s to prevent what we in Canada call the brain drain. Back then, salaries were really higher in American universities, and a lot of Canadian PhDs moved to the States with the result that Canada was experiencing a brain drain, if you like. And the Canadian government put in place a program to retain more scholars by providing them with research funds and appointing them as Canada Research Chair, the name is, on selected areas of scholarship. And back in 2011, I proposed a chair in public ethnography, and through the support of my university, the Canadian government granted me one. And that essentially over 10 years, it gave me $1 million. And I know that as I say that number, it's people are like $1 million. Um, but the $1 million to do research, but part of that million, sounds like a lot of money, doesn't it? Also went towards my salary over 10 years. So it's not $1 million cash in a suitcase and you can go and spend it. So in addition to that, in 2016, which was part of my second 5-year cycle as chair, I was fortunate enough to receive a grant to study natural heritage in Canada at all the 10 UNESCO World Heritage natural sites. So there were 10 in Canada that were fully supported by Canadian focused grant, and then the Canada Research Chair allowance made it possible to travel to the international sites. So that's how the money was pulled together. And the objective was twofold. It was to do research at Canadian, um, the 10 Canadian sites, and then total of uh, 10 abroad, for a total of 20. Um, and what you just watched today is In the Name of Wild, the documentary. There's also a book by that title, um, that focuses on the project as a whole. But there is a second documentary called Inhabited and a second book called Inhabited. Um, that book and that film focus exclusively on Canada, um, but the book itself um, also does a lot of the things that the book In the Name of Wild does not do. And here's what I mean. Um, when April and I wrote Inhabited, the book, we decided that we would write it as a scholarly monograph. And even though it is an ethnography, it's full of all the usual concepts and literature that we scholars normally put together when we write a monograph. But in order to avoid repetition, when we wrote In the Name of Wild, the book, we decided to do it completely differently than we've ever done, and wrote it in the style of a travelogue. So the book itself ended up on the bookshelves of bookstores, which to me as a scholar had never happened before. Every time I've written a scholarly book, I've actually never seen it on the shelves of a normal bookstore, and that allowed it to have a much greater audience, tenfold the audience of the other book, Inhabited, because the style is different, but also because the publisher is different. As a trade press, it has a much wider distribution network, a lower price, and therefore it reached a wider audience, which was part of my mandate as a chair in public ethnography. Having said this, and I'll get to the end of the story, um, uh, it had um, I had become fully aware a few years before when I wrote Off the Grid um, that the amount of people that I can reach with a book, no matter how well written, is infinitely smaller than the amount of people that I can reach with a documentary film. I had learned that lesson very clearly. When I finished writing Off the Grid, it was clear to me that it was a book that I was happy with, and I thought that I would reach about 2,000 uh, readers with, in terms of sales, 2,000 copies being sold, and I think I did, and it's a good number. 2,000 is a good number for a book. The film, it's now 2023. The film has been around for 8 years, and estimates of viewership of that film range between 10 to 20 million around the world. So to me, as someone who was tasked with the objective of doing public scholarship, it was very clear that if I wanted to reach a broader audience, film would be necessary over the book. But at the same time, as a scholar and as an ethnographer, I'm fully aware that the amount of content, the amount of ideas that I can jam into 82 minutes is infinitely smaller than the amount of ideas that I can convey in an 85,000 word book. So it was never a question of one or the other. It was a question of both, because I speak to different audiences in different ways. And I think after 10 years as a Canada Research Chair in Public Ethnography, that was the lesson to me and the lesson that I share with anyone who asks. If you want to um, do public scholarship, it's not about doing one product, it's about doing a multitude of product. It's almost like putting many different dishes on the menu, and different people will choose the dishes that they like. And if they like that one dish, and maybe they want a bite of a different dish, then maybe they'll order a second dish. And so if someone watches the film on Amazon Prime and likes it, and maybe goes on Amazon or any other seller uh, and buys a book, or vice versa. But the lesson was variety and diversity is key to reaching the broadest possible audience. And I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely, Philip. And thinking about this idea of public ethnography, why do you think it's important for us academics to bring our research out of the academic sphere? Why is it interesting? Is it important to make it public?
Okay, well, there are two reasons, at least. I think the number one reason is a moral call upon us to play the role of public educators and public intellectuals in order to share our knowledge uh, with the widest possible amount of people outside of the academy, in order to generate awareness, create conditions for social emancipation, um, improve relations of all kinds. It's our job as public academics, as academics. So that's, I suppose, a moral call. There's a second reason that is less based on morality and perhaps more based on practicality. in more and more countries around the world, we as academics are constantly faced by the need to account for ourselves and to justify ourselves. And often universities are being asked to cut budgets, to give professors less time for research and more time for teaching or other things. And so I think it's necessary for us and strategic for us to be as visible as possible with our research, because as we do so, we can clearly justify how important we are because of how wide our impact is. And I know that we live in a neoliberal world in which more and more universities are facing these demands, and being publicly visible is a way of preventing unfair demands made upon us. And there are many other reasons as well, but we could go on forever. But I think those two are the key reasons in my mind.
And you think there are some topics that are more natural or more easy to bring it to public, to make it more visible? Are there some topics more easy to make it like that?
Yes and no. Yes, because it's obvious. If you look at the things that I have studied, they are typically topics that are easy to start a conversation with. If I go to the post office or the grocery store and a neighbor asks me, "What are you studying now?" and I tell them what I'm studying now, typically there's a million questions that follow, and you can tell that it's a topic, those that I study, that are easier to spark interest in. And so there's a limitation as a whole that we have as public scholars, that some topics are naturally more appealing because they're more timely, they're more curious, sometimes even eccentric. They spark curiosity. So the answer is yes. But at the same time, the answer is also no, because I believe that no matter what topic it is, often it's how we tell the story of that topic. And as academics, I feel that sometimes we are not able, or willing perhaps, to tell stories differently. And by that, I mean, we have been trained, I know I have, we have been trained to write 8,000 word papers for peer-reviewed journals in a language that only we understand, for a medium that only we can access. And we know that our career depends on it. So often we've never been taught to do anything different, but we're also never given incentives to do anything different, because at the end of the year, we are asked to justify how much work we've done, and what we do is we show how many articles we've published in peer-reviewed journals, scholarly books. And so we perhaps are unwilling to do anything different. But if we were willing, and if we had the ability to teach ourselves different skills, then we would be able to tell different stories, the same stories, but differently, perhaps through different styles, or through different media, or simply for different audiences. And film is a very flashy way of doing so, but it doesn't have to be film. It can simply be taking an 8,000 word journal article and turning it into a 1,000 word magazine article with a nice photograph or two, and pitching that to a lifestyle or a social issues magazine, and instantly have an audience that is 100 times broader than the audience that reads our peer-reviewed publications.
And thinking about these links between film and social science and the way that we tell our outcomes, and the other sessions of this seminar, we also talk about the links between, for example, literature and social science. So that makes sense for us. But also in those sessions, we thought that there are many challenges for us scholars to justify why we are doing this way of putting out to making public our outcomes. I mean, why cannot we only, how can we justify to be publishing film or to publish on a different magazine, not a scholar magazine, because we have to publish in this scholar issues. So what do you think about that?
I have the perfect answer to that. And I'm not so strategic. I learned things along the way. And I learned something a few years ago that I never thought would happen. Universities these days are not like they were 50 years ago. They're constantly competing for visibility in order to attract students, and they do so through marketing and advertising, and that costs money. The budget of any university for marketing and advertising is enormous, which is fine. It's what universities want to do. I received an email about 10 years ago, maybe 9 years ago, that made me rethink and made my university rethink this. The email said, and it was about something else, but the email said, it's come to our attention that when we look at the Google search results for people that are that are finding out about university, the number one thing that makes them find us is your research because of how visible it is, I was told. So they said to me, the visibility of your research is worth the entire budget of our marketing and advertising department. And when they said that to me, I almost thought about asking for a salary raise. Like, maybe you can have some of that budget. But I didn't ask. But what they said after that was really interesting. They said it's become obvious that the best way to advertise our university is not by putting up a billboard or a picture on the back of a bus, is by getting you and people like you to be more present in the media. And I thought, great, what's in it for me? What was in it for me was obviously more support for this kind of research. And what was in it for the university was a different kind of advertising, because when you put up a cheesy, let's admit it, often they're cheesy, picture on a billboard, you're just trying to sell something. But when you have a faculty going on the news, or perhaps having a documentary on Amazon Prime and calling attention to the university, it comes with a certain element of truth and credibility and legitimacy and authority that a cheesy advertisement doesn't. So that is the key. And I think that's how we can justify ourselves when we do this kind of research.
Great. Thank you, Philip. And Hugo, when you have any question, you can also jump. Now I want to, sure, Hugo. Tu micrófono.
That's right. Yes, hello, Philip. It's very good to know you, and thank you for being with us in this seminary. It's very interesting to have you and your work here. I'm not sure if I'm going to make the question in English, but I'm going to try it, and after that I'm going to do it in Spanish because it's easy for me. I mean, my question is around the problem. If I understand very good two ideas in your speech that it's very important. One, the moral call of our as researchers that we have contact with the public, and so we have to do something with our work and to have one rapport with the public and one intervention in our society. I understand that the audience, if you make a film, it multiply enormously. But my question is, I think now in Edgar Morin and Jean Rouge, in Chronique d'un été, Crónica de un verano, this classical film of the cinema verité. And the problem in this discussion, in that moment of the social science, it was not only the problem of moral code or the audience, but the difference, the twist, the turning point that you have if you are going to make a film, how the object is going to modify in the moment that you are making a film. I mean, it's different to make a film or make a request or make an interview. And I think that make a film, it's not make a film of, but make a research with the film. That it's different. Make a film of one research, or make a. So in this way, you can even pay somebody else of other institution, other enterprise, and say, if you can make a film about my research, it's okay, it's fine. But it's other thing if you are a filmmaker and a research at the same time. And the object is going to change completely, because your mind, I think, your mind is going to work like a researcher and like a filmmaker at the same time. So in this way, the object is going to be completely different, I think. And it's going to be different that if only a filmmaker is going to make the same work. So that's my question about the reflection. I don't know if I...
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. When we design a research project that is going to take place through writing and film, we need to take into account many things that we wouldn't need to take into account if we just wrote. You're 100% right. It's the nature of the task. And often people say to me, well, don't you feel that by filming, you're actually changing the nature of your inquiry? And I say, yes, but also by writing, I'm changing the nature of my inquiry. So our very presence in the life worlds that we research and our intention to storytell is going to have an impact on what we can tell and how we can tell it. But your comment is very true. Filmmaking changes that enormously, and I'll tell you why and how. The most obvious, there are many different ways, but I'll name one. The most obvious way in which filmmaking changes how we do research is this. When I write, I have access to about 125,000 tools. Those tools being every single word in the dictionary. There's about 125,000 words in the dictionary in most languages. When I film, I don't have access to 125,000 words or tools. I only have access to however many clips I recorded. If I didn't record it, I can't tell it. Yes, maybe I could just put a voiceover in which I recall something, but it's not really as effective. And so filming has a much more, on one hand, vivid way of telling a story, but at the same time, a much more limited and constricting way of telling a story. And you're right, as a researcher and a filmmaker, you have to be able to navigate those two worlds, and you have to tell the story differently. The stories that you tell through film are very different than the stories that you tell through through book. And if anyone is interested in looking at the differences, I encourage you to pick up a copy of the book In the Name of Wild, compare that to the film, and you can see that, yeah, the story is the same, but it's also different. It's certainly told in different ways. And you have to learn to live with that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to do that. I'm going to look for the book because, as I told you, I watched your documentary and I was fascinated. So, and I also, well, that's why I met you before because of your public ethnography work. So, well, anyway, I want to go back, Philippe, to your to the documentary in the name of Wild, and maybe you can tell us why did you decide to make the documentary with your family? It's a different way of doing research, and I am asking you this as a mother of two. So. Uh, what was the challenges? What did you learn during all the process? Anyway.
April is an anthropologist. She's an ethnographer. She's also a faculty. So it was from the very beginning that she and I had decided to do this together. Autumn, our daughter, had no choice. She had to go with her parents. So it was obvious to us that we were not going to leave home our back then 9-year-old for such long periods of time. Not to mention that that little kid had always traveled with us to conferences and things like that. So she was used to long flights. She was used to different food. She was much more adjustable and adaptable and open-minded than the typical 9-year-old. So when we put her on a boat in the middle of the Galapagos and we told her that we were going to have to cross rough seas for the next 2 hours because we needed to get to the other boat, for us it was like, oh well, this is what my parents do. Um, it was only later, to be honest, that as she grew older, that we decided that she should play a much greater role than simply someone who was tagging along. Simply because as ethnographers, it had become clear to us that our identity as researcher was always impacted by having our daughter with us. People viewed us differently. Uh, we were treated as more relatable in a way than we would have been if we had just been two elite academics from the other side of the world. We were a family first and foremost. And so we were meeting different people in different ways because of her being there. And then secondly, as a family, you get yourself into different circumstances and situations when you're traveling with a child. And our stories were largely changing as a result. I mean, April and I are not rock climbers. We would have never risked our lives to climb a mountain. Uh, so we would never have done that kind of stuff. But having Autumn around also shaped what we did and how we did it. And even though she was incredibly resilient and adventurous, there were times when she was part of the story, not only our identity, but part of the story as well. She was also in front of the camera all the time because she was, at least back then, a camera hog. And so it became obvious that she should be part of the story. And then as she turned 16, she, developed an interest in writing. She developed an interest in uh, doing voiceovers because she wants to do that. And so we said, sure, give it a try. And much to our surprise, she was actually much better than us at speaking behind a microphone and doing a voiceover, infinitely better than me. And when she started writing pieces from her journals, um, they were really nice because, I'm a white man, um, and the world has heard enough stories about the wilderness being conquered by white men traveling solo. Um, Writing and filming as a family changed our perspective. It changed our experience, but at the same time, it changed our interpretation as well. So it was obvious that that was the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. She has a very radiophonic voice. I like that. You talked recently about the journals you were writing during your process. So now I'm going to ask you about the tools that you used during your 9 year how many? No, your 5 year.
5.5.
Yeah. During all those years, which tools you mentioned before that you were navigating between the filmmaker and the researcher way? So did you have a journal, like an ethnography journal? How was the process of research during your filmmaking?
Yeah, as ethnographers, we always, of course, work with our field journals and take notes. And of course, being a family, also the constant talking, even at the dinner table. And those are not things you write down, but they inform the conversations all the time. In addition to that, of course, there was the film gear. It was obvious to us that because of the things that we were doing, it had to be minimal. And so at first we were just working with one backpack, and then it evolved to two backpacks. And these are small backpacks that are typically taken on airplanes as carry-ons. So you can understand that they're quite small. And we were working at first with a Canon 5D Mark III, which is a high-end DSLR, and a one normal lens, zoom lens. And then we expanded to having a GoPro. And then later on in 2016, we expanded to having a second, much better camera, which was a digital film camera, Blackmagic Ursa Mini, which then fit into our second backpack together with another pair of lenses. And in addition to that, of course, we had two voice recorders, two Zoom 5 H5N, with one always came with a lav mic, and the other one always came with a shotgun, so that we were recording things in many different ways. Because when you produce a documentary, there are certain standards of broadcast quality that you have to meet, and so costs can go up, but they're not prohibitively expensive. I always say, I mean, if you want to invest in enough good film gear, the best thing to do is save the money for 2 years. Don't go to any conferences. Save the money for 2 years, and the money that you save for 2 years by not going to conferences, buy good gear. It's not that expensive. So those are our tools.
Great. Hugo, do you have any further questions, or the people that is in the meeting room? Yeah.
Yes, I have a question. I mean, it's I don't know how is I have two questions. I have not seen the film because I'm in Europe, and so I try to do it, and I try, but I didn't have the possibility. I don't know why. But excuse me.
No, I'm happy to share more links for viewers in Europe. Just feel free to ask.
No, I'm going to see after, and I hope we can continue the conversation. But I have two questions. One question is about one discussion that we have now in Mexico is about the people, researchers as me, that I make photos, not a lot of things, but we have now constricciones, how do you say that? Problems.
It's okay, I understand, yeah.
Constricciones.
Constraints,
legal constraints. And so we have to, if you want to have a picture of one person, you have to have the letter of him
yes.
with signature. So I think for us it's a big problem, because you cannot do file work, real file work with people asking in every moment to sign one letter. I cannot do that. I mean, I made a lot of file research, and I never could have the signature of people. So it's very difficult. So my first question is, how do you do that, or how is the discussion now in Canada or in that's the first one. Because I have one friend of mine that he's a professor in Amsterdam, and he's going to be here in our seminary in September or something like that. And I asked him exactly the same question, because he worked with religion, and he has pictures, filmations with people that they are making rituals with animals, rituals, and he has never have the signature. And he said me, we have a fight with even with the university, or even with the different people, that we are making a very serial work, and we are having a profound, deep respect with people and with the science. But we have to do that of this way, and it's impossible to have everything. So I want to know, how is the discussion in your experience? And the second question.
Yeah. Would you like me to answer that one first? It's quite similar. Obviously, my university has an ethical review process in place. I must go through that to get permission. And then you're right. Every time that someone is identifiable on screen, I need to have that permission. And so I do travel with informed consent forms or release forms whenever someone is part of the film. There are times when if you are in a public space where people have no expectation of privacy and everyone has a camera out, such as some tourist sites, there is really no obligation to pursue a release unless you're actually taking a close-up and you're identifying someone that way. But otherwise, you're right. It's extra work. So, and I'm happy to take your second question.
It's okay, thank you, because it's something that we have to discuss, and I really, it's very interesting to know that. The second question is about in the way that we are in how do you say
evaluated, yeah,
evaluated in our career, academic career. We have sometimes that we make a lot of pictures together, and we in Mexico we don't have where to show our work, because you are not a filmmaker, and so you are not in the world of the filmmakers in Mexico, that it's a very strong world. So what do you do with your film? What did I do with my film? I don't know. I show the film with my colleagues, with my students, but I don't know. And not only the ways of make the evaluation of our work don't look this kind of work. In Mexico, it's not easy. If you make a book, it's okay, it's fine. You make a good work. But if you make one film, you don't have. You don't. It's going to be a divulgation.
Yes.
But you have to. I say always, it's not divulgation. It's research. It's not. I don't want to divulgate my diffusion. It's not a problem of diffusion. It's research. It's a product of my research. And I make it, I take a lot of time. It was very hard to do it. It's not easy to make a film. It's very, very strong work. So why my work, it's not, it don't have the same value of of a book that I'm sure that I make exactly the main effort to do a book or to do a filmmaker.
Yeah.
How is the experience in your academic work?
At my university, the two things have the same value. I'm fortunate in that sense. Also because I'm in the Department of Communication, which is a natural environment for products to be multimodal. But that's just me and my university and my department. But in general, I must say that in Canada, we're very fortunate that there's a progressive environment in which, in order for me to actually get a grant, I had to fill out a section, and it's an extensive section called knowledge mobilization. And part of that section is to explain in detail how I'm going to make sure that my products are not just limited to articles and books, but actually reach beyond the boundaries of academia. And no one says I have to do a film, but certainly with a film, I reach large audiences. And then when I go and apply for a grant in that section, I can write, in the past, my film has reached this many viewers, and therefore I'm much more likely to get that grant. So there is a direct incentive for us to do so.
Yeah, that's a very different way of thinking the knowledge mobilization, because in Mexico, as Hugo was telling before, we have this idea of dissemination of knowledge. But as these products, this kind of products like the film, the documentary, they are not scholar, no? So maybe we have that challenges to deal with. No, at the moment I'm starting research about photo voice. So it's not filmmaking, but I'm going to put together photo voice and digital storytelling. So at the end, I'm going to make little clips, small clips with putting together the pictures. So yeah, but it's not common. No, so that's why we invited you here, Philip, because we wanted to know from your experience, from an experience of somebody that is in another country that is not Mexico. How is he doing? How is he dealing? How is he reaching more people? No, that is the idea. Not just reach our colleagues, our students, but reach more people. And how can we make our disciplines to be in the public? How can make them to be visible and to be useful also? No, so I don't know if somebody else in the here in the
and
room.
As you look for more questions, I'm going to look for a power charger, because I just noted my battery is about to die. So don't go anywhere. Give me 30 seconds, okay? I'll be right back.
Sure. Bueno, si alguien más de, no sé, Grecia, Sebastián, tienen alguna pregunta, algún comentario para Philip, como ya escucharon, pues él puede entender perfectamente español, así es que si quieren hacer sus preguntas en español, son bienvenidos. No sé, ahora no tengo abierto nuestro screen y no sé si en YouTube hay algunas preguntas, no sé. Javier, si tú lo tienes por ahí, si hay algunas preguntas que podamos recolectar. No hay preguntas. Ok. Hugo, ¿tienes algún otro comentario, alguna pregunta para Philip?
No, me encanta. Me parece súper interesante todo lo que nos ha dicho.
Sí. Y justo lo que decías hace un momento sobre las cuestiones éticas es algo que sí o sí hacia allá vamos, ¿no? Porque, bueno, yo ahora, como saben, estoy en Canadá y aquí hay muchas restricciones y regulaciones y hacia allá va, yo creo que todas las instituciones, en el sentido de que, bueno, pues hay que tener los consentimientos informados, en fin, todas estas cosas que son, de pronto, parecen candados. We're talking about the consent and release forms that we have to fill. That's new in Mexico, you know. We usually don't have these ethical boards. We don't have to fill or to check all these ethical things. But nowadays we start to have some ethical restrictions, such as these ones, as the ones that Hugo was telling you before, that if we are going to publish an image, a picture, or a film that is in the first frame, as you mentioned before, we have to have its consent, no, and its release form. but that is new for us. It's I mean, we don't have that kind of ethical restrictions, which is bad. I mean, because it sometimes research, bad things have been made in research things. So, but also some people said that these ethical things are making us difficult to make our research in a field work, in a real field work. But anyways, that's how it is going. So I think there is no more questions, Philip, but I don't know if you have some suggestions, some recommendations for the students that are watching us, or even for colleagues, other researchers that are interested in exploring the filmmaking or the different kind of narratives in social research. What could you tell them?
So I was trained in the traditional way, in a department of sociology. There were never courses on writing. There were never courses on filmmaking. There were courses on theory, of course, and all kinds of sociological subjects. So I taught myself how to do these things, and I didn't really have the background nor the gear. And at first, I taught myself to write differently, and that was as easy as picking up a couple of books from the library that talked about creative nonfiction and writing for magazines. And that was my first step, because I wanted to tell stories differently and publish them in different media. It was really easy, and most of the editors that I approached were really happy because I was giving them free content, so they were happy to take it. And suddenly that gave me visibility through newspapers and magazines that I didn't have before. And with visibility come a lot of good things. So it was only after making Life Off Grid, the documentary, for which I didn't film anything. My colleague, my student, Jonathan Taggart, did. It was only after that I decided to teach myself how to do filmmaking, which I loved. I didn't go to any schools. I didn't take any courses. I just, honestly, everything that I needed was on YouTube. How-to videos on YouTube are incredible. And over time, I learned to do different things. And as we all know, it takes time to learn. And so time and patience. And the costs are not as prohibitive as you might think they are. But I have to say that even though it's doable and I've done it, you don't have to do it alone. It's really important to understand that it's very, very difficult to do it alone. I've done it together with April. When April and I approach an interview setting, I focus on certain things. She focuses on others. And so besides teaching yourself and experimenting, I'm also encouraging collaboration. There might be a friend that you have in the film department at your university that you might want to work with. And there might be perhaps a professor who has, if you're a student, who has the grant money, but not the skills, and you can provide the skills and accompany them in their research. So there are many possibilities for many different roles to be played. And those collaborations open up a great amount of possibilities. In the past, I'll just end with this. In the past, ethnographic filmmakers did their field work, somehow managed to capture some footage, and then they went back home and they hired a professional editor to edit it together. It happens sometimes even today, but today editing has become much easier. I cannot even fathom what it must have been like to cut things and stitch them together. it's become much easier, and I think it's absolutely imperative that we tell our own stories in film, just like we do in writing. And so, just like we write our own books, I think we should edit our own films. And if you think it's impossible to edit a video, think this. There are 10-year-olds that are editing video these days that are fantastic. If a 10-year-old can do it on a little cell phone, you can do it too. And it will teach you not only to tell a story differently, but also how to see and hear the world differently. And I think it can open up a world of opportunity. So I really encourage everyone to give it a try, because it really is a lot of fun.
Well, I think you made a magnificent work editing and putting together the images and also the musicalization, no? Because I don't know, did you also make that?
Oh no, there's a limit. There's a limit to everything. I have a friend. I have a friend who's a composer, and I give him money out of my grants, and he makes some music on demand. There are things that are just beyond one's capability.
Yeah, but because that was awesome. I mean, the images with the musicalization, it was very good. So, Hugo, I see you opened your microphone.
No, only for say you thank you very much, Felipe. I think your experience it show us how to do some way of doing this kind of products, this kind of work. I mean, I think that for us it's very important, as you said, if a child can do it, but the thing is, we have to think visually. We have to learn, and we have to learn how we have to learn, because I am 50 years old, 50 years old, and we have to learn to think visually. That's very important, and we have, I think, in our university to teach how to think visually, because it's not the same thing. It's not only a technical way. It's a very it's a problem of think with the image. It's not the same thing, and that I think that's very very important. And other thing that I keep of your conference of talk like desafío. How do you say desafío?
Challenge.
Like a challenge that in our university we are proud to have a film, una escuela de filmación very big, very important, with filmmakers very important in the world. But our institute, our research institute, it's near. It's it's near, very, very, very cerca, and but we don't have exchange with them. We don't make things together. We don't learn each other. So it's a very important, I think, for us to build the bridges between the filmmakers that we have in our institution and with researchers that we have a very good, very interesting research. So thank you very much. I think that we have learned a lot of things, and I keep a lot of ideas of your talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we have learned a lot of things, Philip, and I think your work has inspired us, at least has inspired me. So I'm very pleased to have meet you, like not in person, but via Zoom. And absolutely, as Hugo was telling us, I think as an institution, as our institution and the researchers in our institution in Mexico, I think we have to learn, but also unlearn things. No, just the way that that you showed in your documentary, the way that we think about the wild. I mean, that's a story that you narrate in the documentary. how along that process you and your team, I mean your
Family.
spouse and your daughter, unlearned things about how do we think about a concept, an idea. That idea was the wildness, and how did you across that many conversations that you have, I think it was 300 people, if I don't
just about, yeah.
wrongly. So that is the idea. So the idea of making this kind of project, or the idea of us as human beings, is that we have to learn and unlearn. So I don't know if you have any final comments. We're very, very glad that you have been here in our seminar today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Maybe I'll just mention two things. Number one, some time ago, as part of my grant conditions, I was told I should write a book on the things that I learned. And so if you're interested, I did write a book with Routledge 3-4 years ago called Doing Public Ethnography, in which I put all my lessons in there. If you want to check it out through your library, it's called Doing Public Ethnography. And the other thing is, reading books and doing conversations like this mediated by Zoom is great, but it's also great to just grab a camera with your hands and start playing. So if you ever want me to come down to Mexico City and have a week where I can just play around with the camera with you, just give me a shout. I don't mind. I'll be happy to.
Oh, that would be great. That would be really great, Philip. Thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you, everybody, to following on the YouTube and the people that is in here in the Zoom. Thank you also. Muchas gracias a todos por haber estado el día de hoy en esta tercera sesión de nuestro seminario Explicar y narrar nuevas poéticas de la investigación. Pues los invitamos a que nos sigan en la siguiente sesión, que ahora no la tengo a la mano, Hugo, no sé si tú tienes a la mano el calendario, pero en todo caso lo vamos a estar publicando en redes sociales. Pues muchísimas gracias a todos y todas, y por acá los esperamos.
Thank you. Take